Ladies and gentlemen, I haven't done a Walking Dead tier list video in quite some time. And in the past, I have done a Walking Dead villains tier list, but it's been a while since I've done it, and I recognize that list didn't have some pretty big names on there. You know, Lance being one of them. Everyone seemed to comment, "Oh my God, Lance the baddie!" Like, everyone was freaking out. I didn't put Lance in the video, or Pamela, or like any of the more recent villains. Turns out I was using an old tier maker list. So, without further ado, we are redoing the tier list for the Walking Dead villains, and this will include the villains from season 11, which includes Lance, Pamela, and some others that didn't make the list. And also, while I'm at it, opinions do change. The last time I made this video, it was about a year ago, and I'm not saying my opinion changes every year, but the older I get, the more wrinkles I get on my face, the more I think about all of this stuff. No, circumstances change. Each time you watch, you feel a different way about stuff. So that all goes into effect. So this is a no-nonsense video. We're going to be doing just the tier list all in all. And I didn't make this list, so it's pretty interesting to see what they have. And I thought it was funny, so I'm not going to change it. In the S tier, we have Negan status. I mean, it goes without saying, and I don't think it's a spoiler at all to say that Negan will be an S tier villain, but it's funny. Okay, so S tier is Negan status. The A tier is love to hate, which I think is a great thing. And I want to make this point because I'm planning on making a video about it. There's something about characters that are love to hate characters. When I think about that, I think of like Richie Aprile. I think of Gregory. Richie Aprile's from Sopranos. But I think of like characters like that, like Lalo Salamanca, people like that you enjoy hating. They're fun on screen, and you don't want them to die because they're fun, but you know they need to at some point. Like, so that's that tier. Then you have good at being bad. I think this one's pretty self-explanatory. They're good at being bad guys. Then C tier is crappy baddie. I don't know why they called it crappy baddie, but yeah. And then the FD, whatever you call it here, is Dawn status, and that's self-explanatory. And believe me, we're going to get to that. But without further ado, let's jump right in. And at number 1, we have Alpha. And Alpha is one of those people that I think is good at being bad. Now, I think there's a difference to be said between comic Alpha and TV show Alpha, because if we were talking about comic Alpha, I would easily put her in Negan status because I genuinely did think she was phenomenal. But in the show, I don't know what it was. I don't know if it was the fact that it wasn't adapted the same. I don't know exactly what it was, but I didn't feel that her TV show adaptation was nearly as strong as the comic version. I feel like there was a lot of depth that just wasn't explored in the TV show with Alpha. And that's not really a fault of Samantha Morton's, in general. It's more of a fault on the writing crew and all of that, as well as the staffing and things like that from, you know, the show. So with all of that to be said, I think Alpha was good at being bad, but I would never put her in like an A tier list of mine, at least not in the show. In the comics, again, that's a different story, but I think she fits perfectly there. Now, the next one up, we have unnamed prison guy from season 3. I genuinely do not remember his name. I think that's the prison guy, right? But you're going to let me know in the comments if not, but I think that's the prison guy. I don't know. I don't love to hate him. I don't think he's in Negan status. I don't really think he's good at being bad, but he's not Dawn. He's going to have to go in crappy baddie because he's a crappy baddie. I don't remember too much from him like that stood out, other than he was just your stereotypical villain that was in, you know, a circumstance in The Walking Dead, but he wasn't around for long. So I don't really think there's much to say. I couldn't even tell you his name. Definitely let me know in the comments if you know. I don't remember, but that's that guy. And up next we have Beta. Now Beta is, I think, a step above Alpha, just in terms of the story that we got there. But that being said, I still feel like they're in the same tier. I don't really think in terms of the show, one is better than the other. And again, this is the show. We're not talking about the comics, because if that's the case, I would say Beta and Alpha are probably S tiers. but again, it's the show. It's not the comics. And Beta had a really interesting dynamic here because they did the whole like half moon thing. And I really genuinely did enjoy that. I thought it added a lot of depth to the narrative because for those of you who don't know, in the comics, Beta was a famous basketball player and that's how he got recognized by the crew. But in the show, he was a country singer. And I just thought that felt more Ryan Hurst, I think is the actor's name. I don't remember. But it just felt more him. So I liked that. But I didn't really like that they leaned into some of like the whole like, we need to protect ourselves and like the whispers and like it just got a little far-fetched. It didn't feel like The Walking Dead. And I attribute all of that to Beta. Now, I really liked the way he went out in this show, but it felt quick. I know that's not a factor in how good he was as a villain. What I do like about him is I think they really showed how ruthless he was in this show, in some ways more than the comics and in other ways not so much. Like we didn't get a really famous scene from the comics with Beta and another character in the show, but we got something similar with that in Gamma, and I liked that. And for those of you who know what I'm talking about, definitely feel free to comment, but don't give too many spoilers for the comics fans or people who haven't read the comics, because there's a big death that happened with Beta that wasn't ever done in the show, and it was probably one of the best deaths in The Walking Dead history. It was awesome. But anyway, that's Beta. I just don't think there's much there with Alpha and Beta. I feel like there was a lot of wasted potential with the two of them. And again, not that either of them are bad, because I would never say that these are bad characters. As a matter of fact, I think they're very good characters. It's just, I don't think they're Negan status. I don't really love to hate them. They're just good at being bad. That's really what it is. It doesn't mean they're like a shitty villain. You know what I mean? Whatever. Okay, but up next we have this guy who I could have sworn was Jon Snow, but it's one of the Reapers. I honestly forget his name. And I'm just going to say, I'm just going to say, Crappy Baddie doesn't make sense because you know what? Crappy Baddie. Because I fucking hated the Reapers. I thought the Reapers was the dumbest story that The Walking Dead ever put out. Now, if the show was intended to go on for more than 11 seasons, like it was originally planned, I genuinely think they probably would have covered the Reapers more and had more story there. But obviously that didn't happen. We had a show that got cut, so they had to crunch that. And I just wish they erased it entirely because the Reapers felt so pointless. This guy, I don't remember anything. And this is the most recent season of The Walking Dead, but I don't remember anything he did. Like, at all. What did he do? I don't know. And that's why I don't remember his name. And as a matter of fact, because there's other ones outside of Pope, I don't remember anyone's name who was a whisperer. I mean, a Reaper, including Daryl's love interest. Couldn't tell you. Like, it's on the tip of my tongue, and I'll probably remember it at some point in this video, but like, they're all forgettable. Like, there's nothing special about them, and this guy fits perfectly in it. So they're probably all going to be like Crappy Baddie or something like that, but we'll get into it. And as a matter of fact, speaking of Pope, I don't see him on this list. We'll talk about him at some point, probably, unless I forget. But see, that's the thing with these tier lists that aren't made by me. And sometimes I just want to get a video out, so I forget to add people and all that stuff. So I'll talk about him later. I don't think Pope's on the list, but whatever. Okay, up next we have Dante. And Dante is a show exclusive baddie. He is not in the comics in the same way at all. There's a character named Dante in the comics, but it's a totally different character. And I don't want to spoil that for you because that's also another interesting thing that happens in the comics. But I think there was definitely a weird element to this guy. I didn't really like him, but I liked this character because he was unique to the show. And again, I'm not one of those people that's like, oh, if they deviate, like it's an overall bad thing. And I know I've made videos that I want a one-for-one adaptation, but I think this is a good example of when adaptations are done differently, it could really add depth to a story. I think Dante's an element of that. I think there's some other characters on this list that are an element of that. There's one in particular that we're going to get into later in the video, but Dante was pretty good. I did like him. He's either love to hate or good at being bad, because I did enjoy him and I liked that he was bad, but it took a while for us to get the reveal he was bad. So I don't know if I could say I loved to hate him. I think I'm just going to go with good at being bad because he was. And it's look at the tale we're creating. It's all the whisperers. I don't think it really goes much further. I really liked the element that you didn't know if you could like trust this guy. I liked his like creepy demeanor. I thought it fit the character well. It certainly was a little off-putting, but honestly, it wasn't a bad thing. I think it worked in the character's favor, and I think it was just a fun story. Now, what I didn't like is that they killed Sadiq to tell that story, because I liked Sadiq. I always was a fan. I know he's not one of the most popular characters out there, but I thought he was an addition to the AMC version of The Walking Dead that was better than the comics, because I feel like comic Sadiq wasn't really anything, but show Sadiq, I think I liked what he did to the story more, and I hated to see him go. I genuinely did. I felt like they were wrapping him up to be a bigger character than he was in the comics, and I kind of liked that because we didn't have Rick, we didn't have some of the other main hitters, so we needed more people with more story, and we got that in the form of characters like, you know, I mean, there's a ton, whether it's Daryl, whether it's, I don't know, Gabriel, or all of them, which I love Gabriel, he's one of my favorites, but the point I'm overall making is I felt like they were going to put more into Sadiq, but they didn't, and he got killed by this guy, and I liked him. I don't have any problem with him, and again, gotta reiterate it a third time, just because they're in the B tier does not mean I don't like them at all. Like, I'm not necessarily saying that these are bad villains. I enjoyed them, but they're not Negan status. I didn't really love to hate them either. You know what I mean? Like, they just are what they are. So that's what that is. Up next, this is self-explanatory because we have an entire F tier called this. Dawn is Dawn status. Duh, she is the Dawn status. Like, I don't know how else to describe it. Like, it almost feels like we need an extra tier list just for her. But that being said, I got to give a little bit of credit where credit's due. This was a story that was not in the comics, and I think they did a decent standalone story for the show. In a nutshell, I didn't enjoy it. I don't really think it was good. I think this would have been something that could have fit in a show like Fear the Walking Dead, but not on the AMC The Walking Dead, like not on the main show. It didn't work. It felt out of place, and I fucking hated Dawn. I hated her, but I think there was an element to it, obviously, where you were supposed to hate her, and that's what makes for good character writing. You're supposed to hate characters here and there. She is one I hated, but I think it's because, one, I don't like the portrayal that much, and two, I hated the story. So I think it's kind of that is the biggest factor of it, is there was just everything wrong with it to begin with, so it didn't work. And that's exactly what happened here. Just fucked on. Like, I don't know how else to explain it. When she died, I couldn't be any happier. And just every time we got a cut to her and those scenes with Beth, I just wanted to turn off the show. I wanted to go do something else. I don't know what I wanted to do, but I wanted to do something else. And that's because it's Dawn. Who gives a shit about Dawn? We're going to have more in Dawn status, believe me, but Dawn is the Dawn. You know what I mean? Okay. Now it's time to spice things up a little bit because we have Gregory, and Gregory is easily the definition of love to hate. I loved hating Gregory every time he was on screen, and sometimes he was a little annoying, but every time he was on screen, I had a fun time. I wanted to see what happened, and I loved to hate him. Each time he did something that I hated, I loved it more, and I wanted more of it. Gregory was great at that, and I couldn't tell you the actor's name, but he did a killer job portraying Gregory, because in both versions, Gregory was this way. But he was better on screen. I loved it. And getting the satisfaction at the end of his story where, you know, he got what he deserved, it was just so fitting. And again, it's one of those things that sucks because, you know, he was fun to watch, but he needed to go, like desperately needed to go. And I think that's a really good fitting spot for Gregory. You love to hate him. Now up next is this guy. I think his name is Jared. I could be wrong. I'm pretty sure it is, but this is one of the villains that was with the Saviors, and he was the one that in season 8 had that really gruesome death by Morgan, and that was cool. But he was one that is teetering on the love to hate and good to being bad, but I think he better fits the good at being bad category here because he was just a bad dude. And he wasn't bad. Like I enjoyed watching him, but he was a bad guy. I don't know if I'd give him a love to hate, but it's in a similar ballpark to that. As a matter of fact, I'm willing to wager that he should probably be at the top of my good to bad list. And again, that's not to say he's a better villain than Alpha, because this is a different kind of tier list. That's not where I'm going with this. But he was probably better at being bad than Alpha or Beta was, just because I feel like they were a different kind of villain. And I know one of you is probably going to get where I'm going in the comments. So don't get your pitchforks out too soon. I am not saying that Alpha is a worse villain than Jared, because if realistically speaking, Alpha is probably one of the best villains The Walking Dead ever had. But Jared's probably better at being bad. You know what I mean? Like, I hated him more in a good way. I didn't really hate Alpha in the same way, but that's it. So I don't know if he fits the love to hate, but he definitely sits at the top of my good at being bad tier. Now, this lady's name, she was in that one-off episode in season 9 with the scars. I totally forget it. It's something with an L, I think. Who cares? I don't know her name. This is a Dawn status villain. Fuck this villain. What? This is so stupid. Fun fact, she is in The Last of Us, too. So it was really interesting to see her play in both zombie shows or like apocalyptic shows, but whatever. I didn't give a shit about this character. Like, I almost want to say her name was Dawn too, but it definitely wasn't Dawn. But either way, they're both Dawn status. So yeah, I just, there was nothing there. There was nothing there. It was a stupid story that probably should have never happened. It was all for literally nothing, but to basically show some stupid past that didn't even happen. Like, I mean, it did happen, but like, it was just unbelievable. It was so stupid. It was like some Children of the Corn bullshit. I just didn't like this. I didn't like it at all. Not fun, but whatever. That's her. Couldn't even tell you her name. It's very close to the tip of my tongue, but I don't know. Now, up next is Joe the Claimer. Joe the Claimer was one of the quickest villains. He wasn't around for long, but I'd say I loved to hate him. He was one of those characters that I fucking hated him. I really did. And he got the best death. Like, he had a very satisfying, good way out. And he was just fun. But he didn't last too long. I don't know if he'd be in like a Negan status. He's very close to teetering on good at being bad. And that's why I kind of find this list a little flawed in that, like, I feel like it could really go both ways with these two rankings. Like, honestly, I kind of just want to merge the two of them, but I think there is a slight difference. And Joe the Claimer, I think, fits that slight difference very well. I liked what we got with him. You'd love to hate him. And I liked what they did with the story to tie it all together. I thought it fit very well. And so for that, I think it's a step above the rest. Not to say, again, that he's better than Alpha or Beta, but I think, are you picking up what I'm putting down? Are you shooting what I'm loading? You get the drift. Whatever. Okay, now here's a big one. And this is one that, you know, I wanted to talk about with Dante, and now we're getting to it. We have Lance Hornsby. Lance is basically same name character from the comics, but a different and much better character than the comic version. I actually loved Lance, and say what you want about season 11, because some people say season 11 was a very weak season. I kind of agree with that, but Lance made it very strong. Lance is a Negan status for me. I absolutely loved the character. And this goes back to what I was saying again about Dante. In the comics, Lance was nothing, really. He just existed. He was like a right-hand man to Pamela, but Pamela was the real big baddie, even though she wasn't really a baddie in the comics, whatever. He was like the right-hand man to her, and he didn't really have a big part at all. He was just kind of there. You knew his name, but like there was nothing to him. But in the show, he was the villain. And he was a good villain. Some people say he looks like Saul Goodman. I don't see it, honestly. And I wish I did, because I love Saul Goodman. But I get it because he has the comb over and he has brown hair. Maybe some people, I don't see it, but whatever. He was an incredible villain nonetheless. He was so good. He had such a great charisma, he was fun. He was fun to watch. And this is exactly what you want in a villain. You want someone who is fun. You want someone who brings an interesting element to the story. You want a good actor who really fits the role. Like, I think a show strikes lightning in a bottle when they cast, and this isn't like always too methodical because sometimes these characters or these actors just fall into the role, but like I love it when a show gets the casting so right that the actor is someone you could easily associate as being born to play the role. I think the actor who played Lance was born to play this role in a similar vein to how I see Andrew Lincoln being born to play Rick, in a similar way to how I see Anthony Starr being born to play Homelander, Norman Reedus to be Daryl. This is a lightning in a bottle casting. I loved this decision. I thought they did such a phenomenal job with it, especially because the Commonwealth arc in general was just not strong in both versions, whether it was the comic version or the show version. I don't think they had a strong enough foundation, and I'm going back to Robert Kirkman here for this. I don't really think the foundation was strong enough to consider it some of the greats like the Governor arc or the Negan arc or whatever, but Lance made it, man. And again, just really quickly to kind of make what I'm saying whole, the Commonwealth story is necessary. Even in both versions, it's a necessary story to tell. I think the way it ended the comics was perfect, and I think it was a necessary thing to do, but it was definitely the weakest in terms of like content and material. And I think adapting that, you needed a character like Lance to really fill that void. And I think he was a phenomenal addition to the show. I loved him. The only thing I have to say is I didn't love the way he went out. I didn't love him as a walker, but those are small little details. Whatever. Regardless, I really enjoyed his time on screen. Great addition to the show. And I'm glad they had something strong like this to, fill that void in season 11. But up next, we have this girl who is Daryl's lover / Reaper, and I'm going to put her in crappy baddie. I didn't care for her. I totally forget her name, but that's because the Reapers were entirely forgettable. There was nothing strong about the Reapers. As a matter of fact, part of me kind of wants to put her in, I'm putting her in Dawn status. I genuinely didn't find anything there. There was nothing for me at all. I didn't like her. I didn't like that she existed. I didn't think she should exist. She wasn't really anything. She didn't drive the story anywhere. If you had taken the Reapers out of the show, nothing would have changed. You don't really get any character arc with Daryl with it at all. Like nothing really happens there. So there's nothing to report on that. And it's just a waste of time. It was just a waste of time. I don't give a shit for this girl. Or not just this girl, any of them, whether it's Pope, whether it's this guy who looks like Jon Snow in the small picture, any of them. I didn't care for him at all. Like there's nothing to report here. That's a Dawn status. And as a matter of fact, I'm gonna bring this one down too. He's a Dawn status too. If I'm putting her in Dawn status, he's got to go in there too, because they just sucked. They really did. They just genuinely sucked. So that's that one. Now up next we have the Governor's right hand man. I forget his name, but he was a good villain, but he wasn't really anything special. And actually, this is one who I think better fits a crappy baddie, because they're just like, I had no attachment to this guy. Not that he was like an entirely bad character, but I had no attachment to this guy. He went out in a really pathetic way. He didn't really add anything. I never got excited to see him on screen, but it doesn't mean he was terrible. He just wasn't anything special. Like he was really just, I guess, crappy. I don't know. And that's him. Forget his name, but he's kind of forgettable, but whatever. I loved the Governor arc. I don't know how I felt about this guy in it. But yeah, there's that. So up next, we have the Negan status himself. We have Negan. Negan is the best villain of any TV show or movie ever. Point blank, period. I don't care what you have to say. I know there's other shows that have really amazing villains. I know there's other shows that have really amazing character arcs, blah, blah, blah. I think Negan is one of the best written characters of any medium ever. That's part of the reason I love The Walking Dead so much, is that his arc is just so phenomenal. It's in every which way he is right. Jeffrey Dean Morgan, just like Lance Hornsby actor, he was born to play Negan. Like he really was. And I know he was in a lot of stuff before this, like Grey's Anatomy, blah, 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 all that. And he is genuinely a seasoned, very good actor. But I personally think, and I know I'm going to get hate for this, but I think this Negan is the better Negan than the comic Negan. But I think the comic Negan is written 10 times better. than the show Negan. And that's crazy to admit, because I also think the show Negan is a very, very well written character. They're just written, they're perfectly written in very different ways. And I know this is a contentious point, and it's one that I actually really want to make a video on. But Negan in the show and Negan in the comic are two totally different Negans. They follow a very similar trajectory in the beginning, but they go in totally different directions. And I love what they did with both of them. So don't get it mistaken. I don't think this one's lesser than the other. I don't think the comic one's better or whatever. You know what I mean? I think they're both perfect villains and characters, just in very different ways. That for those of you who want to know a little bit, in the show, all of this stuff we see with Maggie and Negan didn't exist, like, at all. It was adapted from something real that did happen, but that kind of ended at around the same exact point where when Maggie came into the cell in season 9, episode 5, and saw Negan was crying and worthless and all of that stuff. That was where the comic adaptation ended and a new Negan began. And I'm okay with that, because I think they both, again, just went in different directions that were written very well. Like, I don't have a problem with either, and I don't know how many more times I could say it. If we're talking specifically about show Negan, there's just so much to love. He's a very charismatic leader. He is a fantastically adopted character. Jeffrey Dean Morgan is perfect. There's just everything is right here. Everything. Even the Maggie Negan dynamic. Say what you want about it, being like a little too will she, won't she, blah, blah, blah. I don't care. I like it. I think the two of them, Lauren Cohen and Jeffrey Dean Morgan, just have such a perfect chemistry. And I know that doesn't make up everything, but it really shines on screen, even if there are elements that have some poor writing, which isn't too much with their dynamic. I just fucking love Negan. I love Negan. He's one of the best characters of all time in anything ever. I've nothing but praise for the character. He's the GOAT. Literally, he's the GOAT. There's no one better than him. No one's going to come close to him. I've been going off on a Negan tangent. Look out for a video that I will have. And if you're not subscribed already for that, be sure to subscribe, because I will be doing a video comparing comic Negan and show Negan. I think there's a lot there that we could talk about. But with that out of the way, we have, I think this guy's name is Nicholas, season 6. I'm going to put him in Dawn status. There was no redeeming qualities to this character. I hated him. I hated what he did for the story. I mean, there was a nice camaraderie moment or two with him and Glenn, and I liked it, but I liked it more for Glenn's development than I ever did for this guy's development. This guy sucked. He just genuinely sucked, and I know we were supposed to hate him. I know that's how he was written, but he just sucked. Point blank period. I don't have much else to say about him. Not a good character. He was one of the moments where I started to realize a slight decline in The Walking Dead. And I know that's crazy. I do, because season 6 is the pinnacle to some people and all of that stuff. But when I started to get really bored with things in the show was around when he came into it. I'm not saying he's exactly the fault for it, but it's just an interesting correlation. Whatever. Anyway, that may be far-fetched, whatever. Up next, we have Shane. I don't even think much needs to be said about this. He's a Negan status. He's an S tier. Shane is a phenomenal villain, and he's better than Lance Hornsby. But Lance is great too. If you're in this status, you're all like really good, except Negan is just miles above everyone. But Shane also was really perfectly written. Great additions from the show that weren't in the comics. They really enhanced his character. John Bernthal was perfect. This was the start to his career, and he was perfect as Shane. Everything was right. The casting was right. The direction was right. The acting was right. Just everything here was great. Shane was one of the best parts of The Walking Dead, point blank period. It doesn't get much better than him. I don't know if anyone else could have portrayed Shane the way he did. I mean, I guess that's what makes, acting so special, is like those decisions, but whatever. Just a phenomenal villain. In every which way, his arc was incredible. I loved him. There's not much else to say that hasn't been said already. We could do a million what if scenarios of what if he was around and all of that, but he genuinely wasn't as bad as the show portrayed him out to be. He was more of a hero. Just he was ahead of his time. You know what I mean? It's like the Gotham saying or whatever, not the hero we need, but the one we deserve, or something like that. I don't know what it is, but that's what Shane was. And up next, we have the Wolves guy. I forget his name. I thought he was just good at being bad. I don't think he goes much further than that. He was genuinely just good at being bad. He was fun. I liked his arc at the end. I liked how he saved that one girl at the end, whose name is also drawing a blank. And this is bad. I'm a big Walking Dead fan, and I can't remember a lot of these names. But whatever. I liked the way he went out, but I also liked his arc as a villain. I thought it made elements of season 6 very strong. I think that was season 6. Wolves was season 6 and 5B, maybe? I don't remember. No, I don't know. Whatever. Either way, I really liked his. No, yeah, he was season 6. What am I saying? Because Morgan was around. Okay, I liked what they did with him in season 6A. I thought he was great, and I enjoyed all of it. So there's not much to say. Now, Pam Milton, or I think in the show or it's Pam Milton. Whatever. Again, if this was the comics, this would be a much different ranking. I really didn't give a flying fuck about Pamela Milton in the show. I thought she was not a strong addition. I didn't like what she did. I thought she was kind of a secondary character to Lance, which is crazy to say. Her ending where she got put in the jail cell just sucked. Like there wasn't much there. So I'm going to have to do it. I'm putting her in crappy baddie. There's nothing really strong about her to me, like at all. I didn't like what she did. She just kind of stood around, very monotone. There was nothing there. I didn't enjoy her on screen. All she did was shoot Judith, but that was an accident. So even at that, you can't really say it was anything too crazy. But I feel like they tried to just like, where they went right with Lance was drawing up the evilness, but where they went wrong with Pamela was drawing up the evilness, if that makes any sense. I didn't really think it worked for Pam. It worked better in the comics where Pamela was never like this evil villain, and neither was Lance. They were both just antagonists, but we like understood them. You know what I mean? Like you don't get that in the TV show. In the TV show, they just turned them into like actual villains and followed that cyclical storytelling that The Walking Dead always has, where people settle. Then there's a bad guy. Then they defeat the bad guy. That's what this was. And I think they forced it a little too hard with Pamela for no reason. They didn't need to do that. And I get it. She wasn't the worst. And a lot of it was politics based. But towards the end, they tried to make her like more of a monster with the shooting and leaving the civilians out and blah, blah, blah. I didn't think it worked for Pamela. There was nothing really there that did it for me with her. And so, yeah, crappy baddie it is. Now, up next is Sebastian. This is another video along with the Negan video. Let me know if you're interested in seeing something like this, because comic Sebastian and TV show Sebastian are they're not the same character. They are the same in terms of heritage, in terms of brattiness, blah, 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 but they are not the same character. And in a lot of ways, I could argue that he was someone you'd love to hate. In a lot of ways, I could argue he's good at being bad. I could even argue he's crappy baddie or Dawn status. He's definitely not a Negan status. But I actually find this one to be the toughest because I'm letting my bias of the comics get in the way a little too much. In the show, I think the very best you could give him is good at being bad, and you cannot go further than that. And part of me is really teetering on the crappy baddie vibe. But I do genuinely think the portrayal of Sebastian was spot on. One of those really just spoiled, rotten brat kids. And I think that shined even in the TV show. And that's the only similarity between comic Sebastian and show Sebastian. I liked how he went out. So I guess at that, I think he does fit here well. I think it just worked for him. And I don't know. I mean, like, there's really not much else to say. I feel like his addition in the show was much more minuscule than it was in the comics, because obviously, if you know what happens in the comics, he's a major character, but we didn't get any of that in the show. And as a matter of fact, they like kind of merged parts of Pamela's story with his and vice versa. And I don't know. I mean, I definitely think he's a stronger villain than Pamela, because I don't know if I'd consider Pamela, like they tried too hard with Pamela. Here he is more of like a villainous character. So I'd have to give him a stronger rating. I have to. And again, this is my list. My channel's called Jerry's Takes. These are my takes. But Sebastian is just a spoiled, rotten brat kid. And that's really it. Like there's not much else to report. Genuinely, there isn't. So yeah. And then up next, we have Simon. This is tough, guys. This one is really tough because I could easily put him in Negan status, but I actually genuinely think he way better fits the love to hate thing, and he goes in the tippity top of my love to hate, genuinely. But it's close. He's basically a Negan status to me too. He is a show original, and it goes back to Lance Hornsby. He is an addition that makes the show very special, and as much as, again, I want a one-for-one comic adaptation, AMC's Walking Dead had some big highlights, and Simon was one of them. Just a perfect villain. And yes, this was essentially just Trevor from GTA brought to the Walking Dead universe, but it doesn't matter, man. Stephen Ogg did such a phenomenal job with this character. He was just such a good addition to season 8. And I have to go back to the face cam for one thing. This is specifically why I like season 8. It's Simon. Simon was a marvelous addition to the show. Genuinely, just a stellar character. I don't know what else to say about him. When Negan wasn't in frame and Simon was, I liked it just as much as I liked Negan. And that's what you want. That's how you write stories. When you have other characters who aren't the big bad, just be just as good as the big bad. This is how you write a show. Simon is a fantastic character. Say what you will. I don't think there's anyone debating that on this video. Simon was just such a special addition, and it's a shame that I guess you could say he was in probably one of the weakest seasons of The Walking Dead, though I don't really agree with that. But objectively, from a ratings perspective and everything, it was probably one of the weakest seasons. But Simon made it very strong for me. I think season 8 is really misunderstood, and just Simon is just. He's so good. I don't know what else to say about him other than give him praise where he righteously deserves the praise. I loved Simon. Point blank, period. There's not much else to say. I liked Simon. And sorry, I think I just skipped back and forth on the thing. Whatever. I've been recording for 36 minutes straight with no breaks now. So thank God I don't have to edit this video. There's nothing I'm going to. And at this point, if I make a mistake, I'm keeping it in, goddammit. I'm not editing this thing. This is way too long. I don't have the time. But whatever. All right. Up next, we have the governor. The governor. Easily Negan status. S tier. By far. The governor was one of the best additions. David Morrissey, I think that's his name, who played the governor, was another just perfect casting. The direction was so well. Him as a bad guy was just so incredible. There was so much to love about the governor, and I liked what they did with him. They gave him more depth in the show than they did in the comics. And again, I have to make this point one more time because it also applies to this character. This is why The Walking Dead worked when it did so well, is characters like the governor, characters even in later Walking Dead like Lance and Simon. These characters that are pretty much show exclusive or have been adapted differently or given more depth are just handled so well in the show that it's the reason The Walking Dead became what it is. You know, it's the reason that it's as special as it is because of characters like this. And excuse me, you guys, I had to clear my throat there. But the governor is just he's something truly special because in the comics, there wasn't really much there to go off of. He just comes in, chops off Rick's hand instantly for no reason. That's what it felt like, at least. And then he was just a bad looking pirate for half the time and just died. There wasn't really much there. I mean, it was a very pivotal arc in the comics. But in the show, they did it right where it became more of a drama with this bad dude. And it was just told so well. The negotiations we got between him and Rick were perfect. The depth we got with him and Andrea, even though I hated Andrea in the show, there was just so much there to love. They really, made something of the town that just wasn't there originally. They did a lot with it that just worked so well. Woodbury was had a personality of its own. I think this was the first big bad in the show and they did him well. And yeah, Shane was a big bad, but in a different way. Shane wasn't as much of a villain as much as that was a family drama element, whereas the governor was a legitimate villain and a very fantastic one at that. There's not much else to say that hasn't already been said about the governor, and this video is running long, so I'm going to try to wrap it up, but I think you're picking up what I'm putting down here. The governor was fantastic, and there's no list I would ever consider the governor to be anything other than an A tier, or I mean an S tier, excuse me. He's just that good. Now up next, we have Prisoner A. I honestly couldn't tell you this guy's name, but he was one of the prisoners and he was the one who the shit happens guy. I don't think there's anything there other than good at being bad. He's just good at being bad, and he died, but he was a very cliched villain. And as a matter of fact, I think for that, he could easily also go in crappy baddie, but there was more story here with him than this one. So I'm going to have to say, technically speaking, he's more good at being bad. And I thought he did a better job in that regard. So yeah, I'll give credit where credit's due. He was good at being bad. And then lastly, last but certainly not least, we have Gareth. Gareth, tainted meat. Tainted meat Gareth. Definitely one of the quickest villains to exist, but I have to say I love to hate him. He was one of those characters that you just love to hate, and I don't think there's much I could talk about, so I guess this is a little anticlimactic, but there's not really much to say in terms of why. It's just the story really made his character strong. I loved the addition of Terminus. I loved how he came off as this really good dude in the very beginning and then quickly became a ruthless cannibal, and I just genuinely liked that. I thought he was fun, even though we only had him for a very little bit of time. I liked what we got there. Gareth was fun, man. I wish we got a little bit more of Terminus because that was a really fun arc. It was one of the coolest arcs in the show. And yeah, you got to give credit where credit's due. I loved to hate him. Even though he was only able to be loved to hate for like 3 episodes, I still loved every second of it. He was really that good. And with that out of the way, that's the list, you guys. Let me know where you disagree and where you agree. I have a feeling this may have ruffled some feathers, so definitely let's start a conversation down there in the comments, and let's keep it as healthy as we can. You got to remember, these are my takes, you have your takes, so let's not disrespect one another in the comments. I don't give a shit if you disrespect me. I could care less, but I'm talking about everyone else in the comments. Let's not fight with other people if they have differing opinions. But with all that out of the way, that's the list. Let me know your thoughts down below. And lastly, and certainly not least, with all that out of the way, thank you again so much for watching this video. Be sure to follow me on Twitter and on Instagram. The handles are down below. If you want to shoot me an email for video suggestions or anything of the sort, that's all down there too. And again, with all of that out of the way, thank you again so much for watching this video. And until the next one, I'll talk to you later. Peace out.